The intransitive dice paradox. This level features a unique set of numbers, and your objective is straightforward: select the best one. But here's the catch. No single die is the best. Suppose the red die defeats the blue die most of the time. Seems like an obvious choice, right? However, oddly enough, the blue die beats the green die. So logically, the red die should also defeat the green die. Except it doesn't. Instead, the green die beats the red die. This creates a cycle. Red beats blue, blue beats green, and green beats red. Just like a game of rock, paper, scissors, but with dice. No die is the absolute strongest, even though each one appears superior to another. This phenomenon is called intransitivity. In most games, if A is better than B and B is better than C, then A should logically be better than C. But here, that reasoning falls apart. This unusual trait means that if your opponent picks first, you can always select a die that statistically has an edge over theirs. However, if they get to counterpick, they can do the same to you. This paradox isn't merely an abstract mathematical concept. It shows up in real-world situations, from sports rankings to voting systems, where choices don't always follow a clear hierarchy. Sometimes victory isn't about selecting the absolute best option, but rather about understanding the system better than your opponent. Bergson's paradox. As you review the applicants, you notice something unusual. Among those with great technical skills, many have poor communication skills. And among those who are excellent communicators, their technical skills seem weaker. Does this mean that strong technical ability and strong communication skills are rarely found together? Not necessarily. This could be an instance of Bergson's paradox, a statistical illusion caused by selection bias. In this case, the company is only evaluating applicants who pass the first round of filtering. If both technical skills and communication skills were required to reach this stage, many individuals who were simply average at both would have already been eliminated. As a result, the remaining candidates create the false impression that these two traits are negatively correlated, even if no such relationship exists in the general population. Consider another example. At an exclusive gym, you might observe that the strongest athletes often seem less flexible, while the most flexible ones don't appear very strong. However, outside the gym, plenty of people are neither strong nor flexible. The gym's membership creates a biased data set, leading to a misleading conclusion. This paradox highlights how filtering data can make two unrelated traits appear connected when they actually aren't. It serves as a reminder that our observations are often shaped by hidden biases in how data is selected. Simpson's paradox. Two doctors work at the same hospital. One has a higher overall success rate than the other. Seems like the better choice is obvious, right? But when you break it down by type of patient, mild cases and severe cases, the other doctor actually has a higher success rate in both categories. How is that possible? This occurs when overall statistics tell a completely different story than individual groups. The trick? Hidden variables. In this case, the doctor with the lower overall success rate might be handling mostly severe cases, where success is harder to achieve. Meanwhile, the other doctor primarily treats mild cases, where success is easier. Since severe cases bring down overall success rates, the numbers appear misleading, even though the first doctor performs better in every situation. This strange effect frequently appears in real-world data. A new drug might seem ineffective overall, but could actually work better for every age group when analyzed separately. A baseball player might have a lower overall batting average, yet a higher one in every individual season played. The takeaway? Numbers don't always tell the full story. Without understanding how data is grouped, we can be misled into drawing the wrong conclusions, even when the math appears convincing. Hilbert's hotel paradox. A place where you'd never have to worry about reservations. But what if every single room is already occupied, yet somehow the hotel can still accommodate new guests? Welcome to the strange world of Hilbert's hotel. Imagine a new guest arrives at this completely full hotel. Instead of turning them away, the manager shifts every current guest one room up. The person in room 1 moves to room 2 moves to room 3, and so on. This opens up room 1 for the new guest. Even though the hotel was full, it magically made space. Now what if an infinite number of new guests show up? No problem. The manager simply instructs everyone to move to the room that is double their current number. Room 1 moves to room 2 moves to room 4, room 3 moves to room 6, and so on. This clears out all the odd-numbered rooms, which are also infinite, leaving space for an endless number of new visitors. This paradox demonstrates how infinity defies intuition. A hotel that is full can still accommodate more guests, and removing people doesn't necessarily make it any less full. It challenges our basic understanding of size, numbers, and limits, because in the world of infinity, the rules are anything but normal. Bootstrap Paradox. An old dusty book. The author's name is faded, but the content is fascinating. Inspired, you decide to copy it word for word and publish it as your own. The book becomes famous, and centuries later, someone finds a copy, travels back in time, and hands it to your younger self. You copy it again, and history repeats. But wait, who actually wrote the book? It was never created, just passed through time in an endless loop. And it's not just books. Imagine if a scientist from the future traveled back and gave Shakespeare his own plays. Shakespeare copies them down, and history credits him as a genius. But if the plays were never originally written, where did they come from? This challenges our understanding of cause and effect. Normally, things have an origin. Books are written, ideas are invented. But in this bizarre scenario, they seem to appear out of thin air with no real beginning. Does this mean time loops can create something from nothing? Or does it reveal a flaw in how we perceive time itself? It leaves us with a strange and unsettling question. If an object has no origin, does it even exist in the first place? Liar's Paradox. What if you meet a man who looks you straight in the eye and says, "I am lying"? Now stop and think. If he's telling the truth, then he must be lying. But if he's lying, then he's actually telling the truth. This is the liar paradox, one of the simplest yet most mind-bending statements that break logic itself. It's straightforward, yet impossible to resolve. Let's put it another way. Suppose a sign reads, "This statement is false." If the statement is true, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it must be true. It loops endlessly with no way to determine a definite answer. Now, why does this matter? Well, paradoxes like this expose the limits of language and logic. In real life, we assume that every statement is either true or false. There's no in between. But the liar paradox reveals that certain statements don't fit into this neat system. It challenges the very foundation of how we understand truth. Philosophers and mathematicians have wrestled with this paradox for centuries. Some propose new ways of thinking about truth, while others argue that self-referential statements like this simply shouldn't exist. But here's the real question. If a simple sentence can break logic so easily, what else might be uncertain in the world we take for granted? Unexpected hanging paradox. A judge sentences a prisoner, telling him, "You will be hanged at noon on a weekday next week, but the execution will be a surprise. You won't see it coming." The prisoner thinks hard. If he's still alive by Thursday night, then the hanging must be on Friday. But if he knows that, then Friday isn't a surprise, so Friday's impossible. Now, if he's alive by Wednesday night, the only options left are Thursday or Friday. But Friday is already ruled out, meaning Thursday must be the day. But again, if he knows that, then it's no longer a surprise. By this logic, he eliminates every day of the week, concluding that the hanging can't happen at all. Feeling confident, he relaxes in his cell until the guards drag him out on Wednesday at noon. He is completely shocked. The execution was indeed a surprise, despite his airtight reasoning that it was impossible. This paradox plays with logic in a fascinating way. The prisoner's argument seems sound, but it leads to a false conclusion. He assumes that if he can predict the hanging, it can't happen. But that assumption collapses the moment he is actually surprised. It highlights the strange tension between reasoning about future knowledge and the reality of an unpredictable event. Just because we can logically eliminate possibilities doesn't mean reality follows our logic. Sometimes the unexpected happens exactly as planned. Temperature paradox. You're in a cozy cabin staring at a sleek digital thermometer on the wall. It's supposed to tell you the exact temperature. Simple, right? But here's where things get weird. Let's say the room is exactly 20 degrees Celsius. The thermometer lights up proudly, displaying 20 degrees Celsius. But that tiny glowing display gives off heat, a small, almost unnoticeable amount, but enough to nudge the room's temperature up to 20.1 degrees Celsius. Now the thermometer is wrong. It catches on and updates to 20.1 degrees Celsius, but that very update adds more heat, pushing the room to 20.2 degrees Celsius. And on it goes, an endless loop where the thermometer keeps adjusting but can never settle on the actual temperature. It's like a dog chasing its tail, frustrating, never-ending, and impossible to win. This temperature paradox isn't just a quirky thought experiment. It's a glimpse into a much bigger truth. Measuring something can change the very thing you're trying to measure. This happens in quantum physics, where just looking at a particle can change its behavior, or in psychology, where observing people can alter how they act. So next time you glance at your thermostat, give it some credit. It's trying its best. But in this paradox, it's forever stuck in a game it can't win. Tortoise paradox. You're having a debate with a clever tortoise. The tortoise asks, if A and B are true, then C must also be true. Do you agree? Achilles nods. That's just basic logic. If the first two statements are correct, the conclusion must follow. But the tortoise isn't done. Now agree to one more thing. If A and B are true, and if A and B, then C is also true, then C must follow. Achilles agrees again. Then the tortoise grins. Great, great! But now agree that if all that is true, then C still follows. Achilles is stuck. No matter how many times he agrees, the tortoise can always demand one more step before reaching the conclusion. The chain never actually ends. This paradox, created by Lewis Carroll, reveals a strange problem in logic. Achilles assumes that if something is logically true, we must accept it. But the tortoise shows that, in theory, someone can always refuse to take the final step, keeping the process going forever. It's a tricky idea. Even simple reasoning isn't just about logic. At some point, we have to stop questioning and just accept that rules work. Friedman's paradox. A researcher wants to find out what makes people happy. They collect data on dozens of factors: diet, exercise, sleep, income, social life, even favorite color. After running statistical tests, they discover something surprising. People who prefer the color blue report significantly higher happiness levels. But is this really a meaningful connection, or just a statistical illusion? This is Friedman's paradox, which shows how analyzing too many variables at once can accidentally produce misleading results. When researchers test a large number of factors against an outcome, some of them will appear to be significant just by chance, even if no real relationship exists. Imagine rolling a die 10 times and getting 3 sixes in a row. It might seem like something special is happening, but with enough rolls, patterns like this will inevitably appear. Similarly, in large data sets, random noise can mimic meaningful patterns, tricking us into believing there's a real effect. In science, this paradox is a big problem when researchers don't properly account for false positives, mistakenly identifying a connection where none exists. It explains why some studies report bizarre correlations, like eating chocolate being linked to winning Nobel Prizes, or how certain baby names supposedly lead to career success. The paradox reminds us that data can be deceptive. Just because two things appear related doesn't mean they actually influence each other. It could just be randomness playing tricks on us. False positive paradox. A medical test says you have a rare disease. Panic sets in. But wait, what if the test is wrong? Even if it's 99% accurate, there's a surprising twist that could mean you're actually healthy. Here's the catch. The disease is extremely rare, affecting only 1 in 10,000 people. The test correctly identifies sick patients 99% of the time and correctly clears healthy people 99% of the time. That sounds pretty reliable until you do the math. Imagine 10,000 people get tested. Since only one person statistically has the disease, the test will likely catch them. But here's the problem. 1% of the 9,999 healthy people will also test positive. That's about 100 false positives. So out of roughly 101 positive results, only one person is actually sick. That means if you test positive, Your actual chance of having the disease isn't 99%, it's only about 1%. This paradox reveals a blind spot in human intuition. We tend to assume a high accuracy rate means a test is reliable for any individual case. But when the thing being tested for is extremely rare, false positives pile up, making the results misleading. It's why doctors don't diagnose based on a single test. Instead, they consider additional factors like symptoms, family history, and follow-up tests. In a world filled with probabilities, the numbers don't just tell a story. How you interpret them makes all the difference. Crocodile paradox. A crocodile snatches a child from the riverbank. The desperate parent begs for the child's return. The crocodile, being unusually logical, offers a deal. If you correctly guess whether I will return your child, I will give them back. If you guess wrong, I will keep them. The parent thinks carefully and says, "You will not return my child." Now the crocodile is stuck. If the statement is true, and the crocodile wasn't going to return the child, then by the deal's logic, it must return the child. But if the crocodile does return the child, then the parent's guess was actually wrong, meaning the crocodile should have kept them. A contradiction. This is a classic paradox of self-reference, much like the liar paradox. The crocodile's logic ties itself into a knot, where any action contradicts the original condition. The situation exposes a flaw in rigid logical systems. What happens when rules contradict themselves? Beyond its logical twist, this paradox reflects real-world dilemmas, like unreliable contracts or misleading promises. If someone sets up a system where any outcome contradicts itself, can trust or fairness truly exist? The crocodile's predicament is more than just a brain teaser. It challenges how we think about reasoning, truth, and deception. And in the end, whether the child is returned or not, one thing is clear. The crocodile's deal was never meant to be fair. Bertrand's paradox. A simple question: if you randomly draw a chord in a circle, what's the probability that it's longer than the side of an inscribed equilateral triangle? It seems like there should be one clear answer, but here's the twist. Depending on how you define random, you can get completely different probabilities. One method says, pick two random points on the circle and connect them. Another method, choose a random point inside the circle and draw a perpendicular chord through it. A third method, pick a random midpoint for the chord and extend it evenly in both directions. Each of these methods seems reasonable, yet they lead to three completely different probabilities: 1/3, 1/2, and 1/4. How can there be multiple correct answers to the same question? This paradox exposes a fundamental problem in probability. What does it actually mean for something to be random? In everyday life, randomness seems simple, like rolling dice or flipping a coin. But in more complex scenarios, defining randomness itself becomes tricky. This paradox isn't just a mathematical puzzle, it challenges the very foundations of probability theory. Without a universal rule for choosing the correct way to define randomness, probability can give contradictory answers to the same question. It's a reminder that in mathematics, even the simplest ideas can become surprisingly complicated. Ship of Theseus. A classic car passed down through generations. Over the years, parts wear out. First the tires, then the engine, then the seats. Bit by bit, you replace every single part. One day, nothing from the original car remains. Here's the question: is it still the same car? Now let's take it a step further. Suppose someone collects all the old parts you replaced and reassembles them into a working vehicle that looks like your original car too. So, which one is the real one? The fully restored version, or the one that gradually evolved? This is the dilemma at the heart of an ancient thought experiment. A legendary ship used by the hero Theseus is preserved in a museum. As the years go by, its wooden planks decay and are replaced. Eventually, every plank has been swapped out. Is it still the same ship? And if the discarded planks were reassembled into a second ship, which one holds the true identity of Theseus's vessel? At its core, this paradox challenges our understanding of identity. Are things defined by their material parts or by continuity over time? The same question applies to people. If every cell in your body is replaced over the years, are you still the same person? The answer isn't simple, and that's what makes this paradox fascinating. Whether it's a ship, a car, or even you, the question remains, what really makes something itself?